This week, the prophecy of a South African pastor that the rapture was upon us took over TikTok. Some evangelical Christians around the world bought into the prediction that Jesus was about to return to earth and collect his true believers. But when the 23rd and 24th of September came to pass and not a single Christian floated into the heavens, emotions ran high. Humiliation, embarrassment, disappointment, anger, and even, if you can believe, frustration. Me and John come from a Catholic background and we went to a Catholic school, and so Christian nuttery is of particular interest to us, especially when it mixes with social media and gains traction at scale. Today we're going to talk about just what Rapture Tok was and what it says about true evangelical beliefs in 2025. And then we'll take a look at the inevitable cope that came from the false prophet and his followers when their proudly espoused prediction of the end of days did not come to pass. John Maloney, welcome back to Don't Praise the Machine. Are you ready to talk about Rapture Tok?
I can't wait. I mean, I'm a little disappointed not to be at the right hand of my father, but yeah, we can get into what went wrong with my metaphysical slide rule and why we're still here. It's the September 23 went past, September 24 went past, and I'm sitting here. I kept all my podcast stuff, but this is about it. All I've got now. I've given a lot of things away, and I've quit my job, so I've got to pick up the pieces now, as do so many others around the world.
Have you, it was the first time I started sending you messages this week going, have you seen, actually the first thing that I sent you was I came to Rapture Tok after Rapture Tok had passed. Right. And it was a video from a young Australian or New Zealand man who we'll take a look at in a sec, who head in hands was saying, me so sad, and me have a lot of apologies to give because I told you all that Jangus was going to come down from the heavens and save us all, and it didn't come to pass. I actually didn't exactly know what the rapture was. I kind of thought I did, and then I double checked all of the actual rapture facts. So perhaps we can start there, John. Just explain to everybody who wasn't on Rapture Tok exactly what happened. So 3 months ago, South African pastor Joshua Keller appears on the YouTube channel Sent Winds TV, and he proclaims that Jesus had come to him in a dream and told him that the rapture was upon us. What is the rapture? So according to many evangelical Christians, the rapture is a moment when Jesus returns to gather his faithful believers and bring them to heaven before a time of hardship and turmoil occurs on earth. So I guess he's sweeping everybody up. It's going to get real bad for everybody who's not a true believer, who's left behind. The specific word rapture is not found in the Bible, and the belief is rooted in interpretations of verses like the you know your Bible. Why can't I pronounce this?
Galatians, I think it is.
Galatians 4:16, 16, 17, and Corinthians.
It's the letter of, I think, one of your favorite church fathers, and certainly one of mine, St. Paul, erstwhile known as Saul, before his conversion on the road to Damascus, and he wrote a letter to the Thessalonians saying a bunch of stuff, keep up the good work down there, don't get any weird ideas. But he said, as part of that letter, he said, for the Lord himself with a cry of command, with the archangel's call, and with the sound of God's trumpet will descend from heaven, and the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive, who are left, will be caught up, or you might say raptured, in the clouds together with them to meet the Lord in the air, and so we will be with the Lord forever.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so it's quite a imaginative verse. He was a wordsmith, old Paul, but people, I think, have obviously had an idea for a lot longer about the second coming of Christ. Because Christ made some fairly specific promises that he would come back. And in fact, he said, I'll be back before anyone of you now living are dead, which turned out to be incorrect, unless you do as people always do in these situations, a bit of kind of theological fancy footwork. And so some people said, okay, well, there's going to be a second coming. So that, I thought initially, well, is that what it is? Is it the second coming of Jesus? But it's actually kind of a thing that's
distinct.
It's distinct. And there's arguments about, is it part of the second coming? Is it before the second coming? But yeah, you've got the Jesus coming back, blowing the trumpets, getting all the people who've died as Christians to come back to life and rise up to heaven, then getting all the other faithful Christians, I think, to come as well. And then you might know better than I would, but my understanding is then there's a kind of 7-year period of tribulation, or a kind of period of troubles on earth based on a complicated calculation based on the text from the book of Daniel in the Bible. And then after 7 years, Christ comes with his saints to defeat the Antichrist at the Battle of Armageddon. It's a real blockbuster. You wouldn't want to miss that. And then he sets up a kingdom on earth and reigns from Jerusalem for 1,000 years. And so not exactly a lot of suspense in the battle, because you know he's going to win. But I guess I guess you still got to participate if you're there. And even though
it's like it's like a Marvel Universe film, you know.
Exactly.
You know the good guy's going to win, but you're still excited. A wrestling
match. It's like, you know, we know, like Vince McMahon has told us who's going to get through, but we can still give the crowd a few, you know, twists and turns along the way. And in this case, Vince McMahon is God. And but yeah, the rapture is quite recent, isn't it? Sort of 19th century idea that that then was formulated over the course of even the 20th century. And there's all these books and films and things that have kind of influenced evangelists that have kind of captured their imaginations around this concept. But it's not something I remember, you know, you wouldn't hear about it in Catholic Church. It's a bit too fruity for that.
We didn't hear about it at St. Ignatius, which, you know, I could have really used that, to be honest. When I was a pimply little teenage dirtbag, I could have used a little bit of rapture.
Exactly.
Something a bit exciting.
When you were getting beaten up behind the sports shed, you sort of said, I'm going to get to heaven and you'll be left here in tribulation, you fucking losers.
I was screaming, tribulation, over and over again as I was getting swirlies in the toilets.
Exactly. Atomic wedgies.
Maybe to colour our episode a little bit more, John, perhaps what I can do is actually show the original video.
Oh yeah, great.
From
Joshua
Twins TV.
Markella.
I also love that because I couldn't for the life of me understand how has a South African pastor on this YouTube channel with 428,000 subscribers, how is that taken over like American and even Australian, New Zealand, sort of evangelical Christian spaces? Like why? And I think the reason is TikTok, basically, that somebody, perhaps with a number of people, I think basically somebody clipped this thing from St. Twins TV, posted it to TikTok, and then people started just doing what we always do in these situations where they just kind of went confirmation bias. If you were already primed as a Christian to be thinking about the rapture, and then you see this, and then people in the comments are saying, oh, I think this is really it. I saw people saying, oh, I get a really good feeling from Brother Joshua. And a few people then said, oh, actually, it's so incredible that Pastor Joshua has said this now because, I mean, this is just more crazy shit. One woman was saying, oh, you know, my children have started speaking to me in Hebrew or some shit like this, you know, just people that were really on the lookout for it really bought in. And then it's a very TikTok thing. It just snowballed where he says it's going to happen, and then somebody else says, oh yeah, you know what, I get a feeling as well that it's going to happen, and I've been having feelings about this, and then more and more people jump in. And then if you've been going to some evangelical church your whole life and you've been hearing about this.
Yeah.
And he speaks with such authority about it. Will get into this a little bit later, of course. This is not the first person who has predicted the rapture. In fact, we can go through the Wikipedia page a little bit later.
Yeah, I mean, that's funny you should mention that, because when I came across the list on the Wikipedia page, I mean, there's something kind of deeply satisfying about a list of false predictions of the end of the world, because people kind of, it's this moment of truth where people are kind of looking up to the heavens going, it's going to happen, it's going to happen, it's going to happen. Yeah. And then like crickets. And then they have to try and figure out, what's my next move? Do I say, oh, sorry, it was October, not September? Yeah. Do I say it was actually 2052, not 25? Or do I just say, I'm just going to give up on the prediction game, and I've done the wrong thing there by pinning my colours to the mast on a particular date. None of us can know when this rapture is happening. Or do you go full tilt and just go, you know what? I don't believe in the rapture anymore. I don't believe in God. This is all bullshit.
I love that. I love that would be the end of it. Would just be, and of course, that's not what happens to anybody.
No,
what they all do is they come up with some other way of explaining it, and the rapture is coming a different time. But I would have loved that. I've loved if the very person who was all in. I mean, it would be a funny social experiment. Would be to gain enough credibility as a fake pastor, and then predict the rapture, and then when it doesn't happen, just go, oh, I guess Jesus isn't real. I don't even know if he existed anymore.
Exactly.
Just like shrug. Shrug.
Say if this is wrong, then I'm not only am I going to apologize, but I'm going to admit to you all that every aspect of my theology is wrong, and yours too. And then follow through.
Sitting there smoking cigarettes, eating Big Macs on camera,
just with Pornhub in the background. Just like, fuck it, everyone. Let's just party. No rapture, no nothing.
Now let me color this a little bit with the original video, which again only has 612,000 views on YouTube, which it just goes to show you how little you need to create a global movement these days, because that's not a ton in terms of, obviously most of these views I assume will have come from people who got the link from news stories that were essentially mocking this event. But I will show you here, John. We'll just have a little bit of a look at the video that sparked the fun times, the fun end of times. And I'll tell you what, it is produced beautifully. They've got the whole like podcast trailer movie vibe intro. You'll see here. I'll just play the first little bit of it.
Why
here.
Is there some kind of robot bear in the background?
It looks like is that a cause, a KAWS?
Oh, maybe
thing. They've gone for the robot cause doll in the background. I think it's a cause thing.
Maybe that's
so let's have
leftover from previous episode about false idols or something.
That was somebody brought it out as a prop.
Yeah.
Here we go. So let's have a look here. This was the original video. This is just the intro to an hour long podcast that we won't watch. I'll just give a little shout out to anybody who can't see the video. The women who host this, I'm absolutely loving their matching looks, and we'll talk a little bit about them in a second as well.
The rapture is upon us, whether you are ready or not.
Yeah.
Today, what people will hear is God revealing His plan
to His people,
to the people of the world.
Yeah.
God took me to see the future, and then He brought me back. And then in heaven, in a throne room, I see Jesus sitting on His throne, and I could hear Him very loud and clear. I am coming soon. And to the people who are listening, please pay attention to what I'm going to say. He says to me, on the 23rd and the 24th, 2025, I will come to take my church.
It's a date.
There's a date.
There is a date.
Are there other people who have also said the same thing to confirm what you have said?
Look at that. How
Yeah.
exciting.
Are those women twins? They've looked quite similar.
Good question. They do look kind of. I do. If anybody has missed,
Oh, maybe
they
not.
do.
They just dress the same.
They do.
made
It
up.
looks like a
They got
kind of
the same
Star
makeup
Wars
artist.
council with those
It
two. there.
does. That's true.
Look,
Yeah.
it looks like
I mean, they
they're
do look very
listening-
similar.
No, I think you're right. I think they are twins, John.
Yeah. There you go. I mean, that's all the signs I need. Twins
Yeah,
in red cloaks.
You're sold. Now, what I do want to share with you as well is one of my favorite parts about this whole story is the actual dream that he had and the details of it.
Okay. Yeah.
Are particularly fun. So I'm just going to play that to you, John.
Yeah.
So this is him. This is just a short clip from somebody clipped it and put on TikTok. This is him explaining some more details about the exact conversation that he had with God, or one of them. I think maybe he'd had a series of conversations with God.
2018. Again, in a vision, in a dream. I don't see him in this dream. But I hear a voice so loud, his voice so loud. And he says these words. And to the people who are listening, please pay attention to what I'm going to say. Mark the words that I'm about to say, because none of the words that I'm saying are going to fall to the ground. None of these words will be empty because they come from God himself. In other words, they will be fulfilled. He said these words, a loud voice. I didn't see him, but he spoke in the voice in this dream. He said, there will be no World Cup 2026.
Wow.
He was speaking of the Men's Soccer World Cup. Because life on earth will not be business as usual for those who are left behind.
So
Won't
there
be
you go.
business as usual. That doesn't sound like God to me. Why is he using that? Why is he using weird phrases like that? There's not going to be a World Cup.
Yeah, I like that. He's basically brother Joshua here is basically saying that God came to him and said, bit of sad news for football fans around the world, which I'm going to have to lay down to you here. I know you're really looking forward to the 2026 Soccer World Cup, but unfortunately, there are some logistical problems that will prevent this tournament from taking place.
Yeah.
And I think it was what you were speaking about earlier, John, that the period of tribulation, the period post Jesus coming down, where everything's a bit rotten on earth for a while. I mean, the last thing people are going to be thinking about are going to be, I mean, if you thought it was difficult to put things on during COVID,
Exactly.
just wait.
God said there is going to be something that'll be called the Tribulation Cup, but it's pretty piss weak.
That just sounds like Mortal Kombat, like the Mortal Kombat tournament.
Exactly.
So there won't be the World Cup, but there'll be various
Tribulation
realms
Cup.
of good and evil.
There'll be a lot less people because all of the faithful will have come to heaven. So most of the people who are left aren't going to be very good at soccer, and there's less of a talent pool to pick from. So the Tribulation Cup will be fairly unimpressive.
There will be but don't worry, it will still be the FIFA Tribulation World Cup. So no surprises there. All of the corrupt FIFA officials will be left behind, and they will be able to continue in their administrative duties.
This is Sepp Blatter, the Antichrist, will be there. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and
so that's what sparked this whole thing.
Yeah, and then also he had said, it also is going to coincide with Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year
Rosh Hashanah.
thing with the trumpets, and people said, this is happening. And of course, again, confirmation bias vibes. People on TikTok who are primed for this start seeing in the news. They start seeing astrological events as a sign. Now,
I heard people talking about number plates and other kind of random,
like
just
numerology
kind of stuff
vibes.
Just stuff that people with like psychosis, essentially start saying, I was watching the news and it seemed like the person was sending me coded messages, and I was looking out my window and I saw a car go past and it had it had a JC in the license plate, and I took that to mean that Jesus Christ was coming like the car was towards me. Things like that.
That's right. And then so perhaps now we'll have a look. So these are some of the people that were really looking forward to it. Particularly this guy's face was all over TikTok, who I do have quite a bit of empathy for, because he's probably
Seems like
a lovely
decent
man.
sort of guy. Yeah.
But
I don't know who you're talking about anyway.
This is him pre-rapture. This is him pre-rapture. He's pretty G'd up about it. And here he was telling everybody to get excited because hang on, not this one, because it's a real common.
Do not doubt. Do not worry. The rapture is going to happen September 23rd to the 24th, when the Feast of Trumpets begins. Any moment from then. The Feast of Trumpets will begin 15 hours from now, from when I'm recording this video. At any moment from then, it can happen.
Wow. I mean,
wow, he's excited.
He's excited. That is a frightening level of conviction.
Yeah. That's
Isn't
Tilahun Desalegn. Is that right?
Yes, and that's right.
He's, I think he's Australian. I mean, he certainly looks to be.
Sounds it, yeah.
Sounds
Kiwi
it.
or
He
Australian.
Looks like there's some gum trees in the background of some of his videos, I noticed.
Yeah.
And he said, as I understand it, he had a fairly modest following as well, of mostly kind of your watchers, that they call themselves sometimes watchers, who watch for signs of the rapture. And he was inspired by Brother Joseph's prediction, like a lot of people. And I think he talks about in a later clip that he gained a much wider following, including people who were just sort of morbidly curious, when he posted a reel of the sale of his car, which he'd owned for 5 years. And he said,
I think I have that here, John, if you want to.
God has told me to sell my car because I won't need it beyond September, baby, because the bride of Christ is flying. The bride is flying in September. I can't wait to see my King Jesus. By the way, my driver's license expires in September, so it's just like perfect timing. I'm gonna see Jesus. Are you not excited? Tell me you're excited to see Jesus.
Is he like being a bit funny? I don't. It seems like he's...
I think he's a true. I think that's genuine, because there is. I did have to sift through a lot of mockery and satire to get to the real stuff on here, because loads of people were pretending to be the faithful, which will land you in hell, by the way, for anybody.
Yeah, even we know not to do that. But Tilahun is definitely genuine. I mean, he's got a kind of a relatable, he's young. He's kind of got a relatable style. He's quite articulate. And in a subsequent video, you actually see the car being loaded onto a truck and whisked away, because he's saying, what am I going to need a car for? I'll be in heaven. And that level of practicality was something that really captured my imagination. One of the things that I particularly loved about Rapture Tok was just how practical some of the responses from the faithful were, and how it kind of fit into this very familiar style of TikTok, kind of, I'm helping the community. I'm giving you a step-by-step guide.
Add value.
I'm adding value. It's a bit of self-help kind of vibe to it. And I think that's something that I can't help but admire, because we were, like, our experience of religion and Christianity in particular was Catholic. And Catholics would never talk about it in this kind of concrete sort of everyday way. They would say, like, the rapture's happening in some sort of abstract philosophical sense. They wouldn't say it's happening at about 10 o'clock on Thursday, so I've got to sell my car by at least, at the latest, 10 a.m. on Thursday. They just don't think in those kind of, this is actually happening in the way that everything else in my life is really happening. But that is absolutely how some people approached it. And they thought about, okay, so God is coming, Jesus is coming. He's going to take us, the faithful, assuming I'm lucky enough, which of course all these people thought they would be, to be whisked into the air. And everyone else gets left behind and has to participate in these 7 years of tribulation. And I guess their fate's kind of resolved at the end of that process. But I have to do my bit for myself, but also for those people. And so people were doing things like making videos on how to give away your belongings to strangers because, they're going to be in all likelihood not raptured when you get raptured. Maybe they'll need non-perishable foods. They'll need soup and beans to get them through the tribulations. Obviously, you had Tilahun selling his car, and lots of people, talked about selling their belongings. There was a woman who talked about it as though she was kind of like, she went through like an inventory of her possessions and was saying, well, this is a kind of lamp from 1969. It's valued at this much, and here I am giving it away. Another woman was like, don't forget to unlock your phone.
Yes.
And what I've done is I've left a note with my unlock code because people are going to want to see photos that I've left on my phone. And I've also left them stuff in my notes app, like helpful tips on how to prepare for the tribulation and how this, how to make sense of what's going on in terms of biblical theology. And, people were saying, and the other thing which I loved and which Tilahun, apologies, Tilahun, if I'm mispronouncing your name, I assume you're watching and listening. He did something that I think a number of other people did too, which was purchase a shofar. And a shofar is the kind of Jewish traditional horn style trumpet. And why did he do that? Well, because in that passage from Thessalonians, it says, let me just go back to it. It says, the Lord himself with a cry of command, with the archangel's call, and with the sound of God's trumpet. And then there's other kind of, there's a famous poem by the one of my favorite English Renaissance poets, John Donne, who depicts the rapture or depicts the second coming of Christ as marked by the blowing of, trumpets from heaven. So people took these kinds of sources and thought there's actually going to be legitimate, physical trumpets, and I've got to go and get, because I want to be, I want to be part of the trumpet blowing ceremony. I'm going to actually go and find a shofar on Amazon and then practice. So Tilahun is literally, he kind of cuts to him and he's sort of joking about it, like, oh, I'm pretty shit at it or whatever. But he's got his shofar and he's like, wow, I'm blowing my trumpet, I'm selling my car, I'm all ready. And it just amazed me. And it kind of made sense when I dug into it because, apparently this is not a new thing. And there are people who, as we alluded to at the outset, have been making predictions of the rapture for some years, but often in this similar way. Like there was a guy who did a book about 88 reasons why the rapture will happen in 1988. There was another guy who talked about, spacesuits and rockets being incorporated into this process of people going up into the air. So people are obviously prepared to to try and think it through in very concrete terms and not just leave it to, it'll somehow happen. They're like, well, it's going to happen, and it's going to have practical aspects to it that we have to get our heads around, which I loved. And now all those people, of course, are up shit creek because they've sold their vehicles, they've quit their jobs, and evidently they're still unraptured.
Deeply unraptured. And John, that brings us very neatly to the day after the end of days doesn't happen.
Okay,
And of course, don't mean to make it a pile on, but he did really become the face of this, at least in my algorithm. So we're just going to pop back to those beautiful gum trees, that corrugated iron roof. We're talking about Tilahun, and the rapture didn't happen, and he told everybody that it definitely was, and now he has to go on for the rest of his life, and that's going to look a little bit like this for him, talking to his followers. Banging his fist on his forehead.
Yeah.
Rapture didn't happen. I'm sorry to everyone I let down.
Alrighty, folks.
Yeah, that's what that's the text. And
the rapture didn't happen.
And he's not so devastated that he can't put a backing track on the video.
When it didn't happen, by the time that I said it would, that I would upload a video of me publicly apologizing and repenting of my failed prediction. And I want to acknowledge that it wasn't me saying it might happen. No, I was like fully convinced.
Appreciate this. He's popping to it here.
Repeatedly said in all of my videos that a rapture would happen sometime on September 23rd or the 24th or across both dates because of time zones, and maybe even cross into the 25th. At time of recording this, it's 9:45 a.m., the 25th of September. The rapture hasn't happened. So I've been talking about the rapture happening in September, going all the way back to June. June 21st was my really first video where I started speculating about.
So that goes on for 9 minutes.
Yeah.
Where he talks about the fact that it didn't happen.
Except then in the last second of the 9 minutes, he goes, "Whoa," and then gets raptured right at the end. What a twist.
He gets vacuumed up. He gets vacuumed up. Like, for anybody, I also had here in my notes that for anybody who doesn't know exactly what the rapture would look like, I want everybody to just remember Charlie Bucket and Grandpa when they stole fizzy lifting drinks in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Yeah.
And they started floating up towards the spinning fans. That's what I imagine.
That's a good. Yeah, it's going to involve, I think, sort of pneumatic tubes that have been custom fitted to each of the faithful, and they just come down over whatever they're doing. There's footage of like people, this is how literally people took it. I mean, I've talked about the cars and the shofars and whatever, but some people were like, well, I've got to be outside. Like, well, I think God will work it out.
That's right.
It's kind of like, he's not going to go, well, if you were serious about faith, then you wouldn't be sitting under an insulated roof. Well, how am I supposed to rapture you now? At least open a window. People were just getting their necks snapped against the ceiling because he was attempting to rapture them. I agree. I felt a bit of empathy for Tilahun as well, because it's not a easy thing to go through, and he sold his car, and also he doesn't do the kind of mealy-mouthed, revisionist history of what I actually said and how you interpreted it, and I didn't actually commit to it. He says, no, I 100% believed it, and I was 100% wrong. And I think there are plenty of other people on the internet, some of whom we talked about on this cast, who could take a leaf out of Tilahun's book, not necessarily in terms of his capacity to predict the end of the world, but certainly in terms of his capacity to face up to the consequences of his poor predictive skills. So full points to you for not trying to weasel out of it and just admitting that you screwed it up. Although he did manage to kind of make it a slightly performative looking 9 minutes with a kind of moving backtrack a backing track as well, which I loved.
You got to use trending music or people. Isn't that funny to imagine him recording the video and then just hunched over his phone, going through all the music to pick.
Which one will be the right one for the video where I'm admitting that I was wrong
Why
about
didn't-
being raptured.
He could have used Snowfall by Ridishi, or the Darling Hold My Hand, the Jet 2 Holiday viral sound, something like that, or the do be do be do be do be do be do do do.
And apparently Joshua, the original rapture predictor for this round of false rapture prediction, had according to Lad Bible, which I was consulting earlier as I do for all of our podcast episodes, he had a live stream going and he was sort of getting uneasy as the hours went by. And he was kind of saying things like, wondering out loud, I wonder how because Tilahun made reference there to time zones. And of course, Joshua said it could be the 23rd or the 24th or both. So he gave himself a little bit of wriggle room. But then obviously the wriggle room was exhausted as time went by. And apparently it was just people gradually kind of dissipating from this live stream until it was just him. And he's going, I don't know what's happened. And then at about 12:18 a.m. on the 25th or thereabouts, he was like, we're going to he said, please keep waiting on us. He is coming. We're going to take a break. And he says, he reassured his viewers that it was going to be one of these 2 days, the Lord knows. And then he, just was kind of staring blankly into the camera and ended the live stream. And I think he's basically gone to ground since then, like so many false prophets before him.
Well, you're gonna love this. This is one of the things that people were calling for, John, after the rapture didn't quite happen. I think a lot of people had invested quite a lot. They sold their possessions. They told their friends and colleagues to repent at once or they would be left behind. So this is what some people were calling for, and this is one woman responding to it.
A lot of people are saying that Joshua should be stoned because he's a prophet. I'm just going to say this. If you're going to stone him, you're going to have to stone me too.
Ooh.
And if it be not for the truth, then let it be for love. So many people say, I will die for the truth. But would you die for love?
So
Nice.
pretty severe.
I
think the other thing,
I don't love the guy, but fucking hell, that's a bit heavy-handed. Let's not go nuts.
I think the other thing this reveals is you and me are not involved in evangelical or any kind of fundamentalist religious circle, and it is strange to be confronted with people who are true believers in a way that you don't think about in your day-to-day life. And it's strange to think that you could be sat next to somebody on the train who is the type of person who believes that Jesus is returning, just happens to return, even though he's been dead for almost 2,000 years now. Jesus, he said almost 2,000 years to return, but you just happen to be alive in a short window of time when he does return, and you think that you are going to float into heaven, and it does this funny thing where it does kind of bring into harsh light, sort of Catholicism. It does that strange thing where it's so reserved. It doesn't really have the convictions of evangelical. It sort of hides, but this always kind of frustrates me a little bit about Catholicism is that it's too cool for school. It just kind of says, hey, look, don't test God. Don't expect anything from God. He definitely is there, even though he doesn't ever do anything. There's no evidence for him, and he never will do anything. Or they'll kind of they might sort of suggest, maybe he will, but you would never put a date on it or expect that anything wacky was going to happen. But these people, it reminds me of Mehdi Hassan. I
where
think
their mouth is, and I love that.
Yeah, It reminds me of like when Mehdi Hassan debated Dawkins at Oxford, and Dawkins basically said to him, he's a Muslim, Mehdi Hassan, and Dawkins basically said to him, do you think that Muhammad flew up to heaven on a winged horse? And he basically makes Mehdi say, yes, like because I am a Muslim, I have to believe that. And Dawkins is just like, well, what are we doing here? And
this is cuckoo.
The rubber hits the road.
Yeah, exactly. And certainly the kind of intellectual version of Catholicism that we had at a Jesuit school, people do whatever they can to stop the rubber hitting the road. If you say, so there was an actual guy, a flesh and blood person, you know, he had a beard, and then he was able to raise people from the dead and perform miracles. And do other people who've come after that also have that ability? Like, are there now miracles going on? Is he actually going to come back, like physically ride back into Earth? And they would just be like, well, you know, it's not meant to be understood that way, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, well, that's what it says. Like, you know, why are we doing this if you're not committing to the crazier aspects of it? And if you do believe those things, why aren't you kind of living with this like sense of constant amazement? Because you're like, fucking hell, there's this guy who was God. Like, don't worry about going to work tomorrow. What the fuck are you doing? And
don't worry about spreadsheets.
Exactly. Stop talking about starting your own accountancy firm and fucking just like get about in a toga converting people to Christianity. And evangelicals are a little bit more like that. You know, they've kind of they're willing to put their money where their mouth is. But also, I mean, it's got some weird overtones, like with all the stuff currently happening in the Middle East. Some of the articles I read about Rapture Tok talked about this kind of allegiance between Christian evangelicals in America in particular, where the kind of belief in the rapture is really, that's the kind of epicenter of it, and their feelings about what's going on in Israel, because Jesus has this, because the part of the rapture theology is that Jesus will run a kingdom on earth for 1,000 years after these 7 years of tribulation, and the headquarters of that kingdom will be Jerusalem in the state of Israel. Then they say, well, we can't allow, you know, for example, we could never allow like a dissipation of the state of Israel. We could never allow like too much ground to be ceded as to a, you know, two-state solution, because then, you know, we're going to potentially fuck with God's plan for the rapture and so on. So they really apply this stuff to geopolitics, which again is like totally foreign to anything that, you know, a kind of snooty suburban Catholic would ever be willing to commit to.
Imagine Jesus. Sorry, go on. Imagine the return of Jesus, and he goes to set up the headquarters, and the whole thing just ends up in some, you know, there's just a whole bunch of meetings and committees, and it's basically like, again, it's the Israel Palestine thing, but now there's another element, which is that Jesus needs to set up his headquarters.
And he's going to some kind of, you know, international arbitration to work out whether he even has jurisdiction to set up a kingdom on earth. Getting all these constitutional law scholars out of the woodwork.
Jesus is like banging his fist on the table talking about Yasser Arafat and things.
Exactly. Like that, lamenting some discussion that happened in Camp David or whatever. But there you go, left behind theology. So Joseph's, is it Joseph or Joshua?
It is Joshua.
I think I might have
Pastor
called him
Joshua
Mlakela. Yeah, Joshua Mlakela has gone to ground. Obviously, Tilahun has had the integrity to come out and say, I'm wrong. And he said, I'm just not going to, you know, I'll keep watching for signs of the rapture, but I'll just keep it to myself from here on. And I was like, yes, that's a pretty sensible solution, actually. Like, by all means, keep it in the back of your mind, but maybe don't jump on social media and make any concrete predictions unless you're absolutely sure.
Here's the other, just to close out, John, this is just the other thing. It's just when these particularly strong convictions meet the TikTok algorithm and get spread all over the world. And then you've just got this at an incredible scale on earth. It is kind of frightening because, you know, you just think how many people could something like this mobilize? You've got a certain, you know, it's a numbers game. TikTok's in millions of people's pockets, and there is going to be a very small percentage of them that are susceptible to this kind of stuff. Yeah. And then they all meet each other in the comments of these videos, and they start posting, and then it's just wackadoodle town across the world within days.
It's true. I mean, you know, obviously pre-social media, this Mlakela fellow just wouldn't have had anything like the traction that he's gotten. He's just kind of... He'd just be on sort of public access television in South Africa, and nobody would give a shit what he thought. But even if you look back at these guys' false predictions that have come in the past, you know, like I said, this guy Edgar Weisnant wrote a book in the 80s about 88 reasons why the rapture was going to happen, and there were people who obviously bought this book and believed it, and it was something of a kind of sensation at the time. But yeah, because the internet didn't exist, there was nothing like the potential for it to kind of escape into, you know, different countries or different communities, or even kind of maybe, you know, talk people around who just weren't part of these communities but were a bit vulnerable to that kind of way of thinking. So it's a fascinating, and you know, people talk about political movements on the internet as having this slightly religious kind of, you know, component to them, where everyone's sort of clambering to be pious. Everyone's clambering to be like the most kind of in the know person. People are, you know, talking about, oh, I've noticed this, I've noticed that. Like people often compare, you know, woke culture or cancel culture to religious fervor. And so it's funny to see an actual religious movement on the internet, which has this very familiar rhythm of like going viral, people getting on there and saying, oh yeah, I saw this on a license plate, or I saw a cloud that was shaped like Jesus, or, you know, I saw Jesus in my toast or whatever. And then it just kind of fuels this mass hysteria, which is kind of unsettling, because it's just like,
and the speed, John, like you were talking about this book from 1988. Imagine how long the ideas from that guy's head onto the page, finish the script, get it published, get the book distributed, get the book into people's hands. Then those people have to like share the book with people. Think of that versus like there would be evangelical Christians that stumbled across Rapture Tok like the day before the 23rd and 24th and would have been all in.
Then they were like, fuck me, I've got to, you know, give away my pet food because my dog's probably going to be raptured with me or whatever.
I love that people said unlock your phone because your relatives who'll be left, friends and relatives, might need to access banking and stuff like that. Which you're gonna have all the apps, and also leave your keys somewhere that's like put the unlocked phone and keys on the kitchen table so people can drive the car and access the bank accounts. And I also just love, like, so you think you're floating to heaven and your loved ones are getting left behind in tribulation, and they're going to need to do a bit of banking and door opening during the tribulation. So you better like sort that out for them.
Satan and his minions fighting Jesus, and they're like fucking around going, now what would John's password have been? Fuck.
John, this has been one of the best Rapture Talks that we've done on Don't Praise the Machine. I can't wait for the next one. So everybody, I want to say to you, thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Don't Praise the Machine. If you want to get in touch, we've been having a few emails this week because John sent out his beautiful newsletter. That's back up and firing, and we had a bunch of beautiful photographs of the Don't Praise the Machine community in there. John's going to be sending. Well, John, tell everybody when they can expect the email.
So the email newsletter is back up and running. You'll get it in your hot little hands Thursday morning Australia time. So adjust your clocks. Again, it's a bit like the rapture. You've got to think about time zones, and you've got to account for that in my prediction of when you will receive the newsletter. So every week on a Thursday, perhaps on a Wednesday night, if you're not in Australia, you will be blessed with the Holy Scripture of the DPTM newsletter.
And how, John, tell us how people can subscribe to that newsletter that you're talking about.
Yeah, sure. If you go to, let me just actually check if it's dptm.org. It is.
It is.
Yeah, if you go to dptm.org, I haven't actually.
You can do it right now on your phone.
You go straight there, you join the DPTM community. All you got to do is enter your email address, hit subscribe, and it's right there. And it takes me days every week to write it, but I think you'll agree that the result speaks for itself. Next week, I'll be transcribing an interview with Brother Joshua where he talks. We have a heart-to-heart debrief, post-mortem, what went wrong, what happened to his spiritual slide rule, and when the rapture is actually going to happen.
Thank you. I can't wait to read that. Thank you so much, everybody. And we can't wait to see you next week.
The podcast. Bye.